Well, back home and back in the kitchen, a little worse for the wear, nursing a pretty bad cold, but I didn't want to miss this week. So join me for a cup of tea. We're going to do a 4-part series over the next 4 weeks. We're going to talk about in-laws, what went right, what went wrong, and maybe what you're dealing with right now, whether it's a daughter-in-law or a son-in-law, whether it's changed your relationship with a child of yours a little or a lot, or maybe it's your son or daughter's in-laws. Maybe you like them. Maybe you tolerate them. Maybe you're dreading Thanksgiving. So join me over the next 4 weeks and let's navigate the in-laws. Well, when your child gets married, whether it's your son or your daughter, it's one of those beautiful, but complicated milestones. You gain another family member, but you also lose a little of that familiar rhythm you once had. Suddenly you're not just their mom anymore. You're a mom-in-law, and that small tweak can bring a big change in dynamics. So today let's talk about what really happens when our kids marry and how to stay close without crossing the line, how to handle difficult spouses or shifting loyalties, and how to protect your peace while keeping harmony in your family. So first and foremost, there's an emotional shift. You go from being a mom to a mother-in-law. And when your son or daughter marries, you don't stop being their mother or their mom, but your role starts to evolve, whether you like it or not, right? They're creating their own unit, and that's healthy. We understand that, but it can also feel like a bit of rejection or loss, especially when you're not prepared for it or you're not thrilled with it. You used to be the person they called first about everything. Good news, bad news. What do I do about car insurance? I've got the flu. What do I take? Now that call may never come, and you find yourself asking questions rather than being asked for advice. But the goal can't be to hold on tighter. We want to, but it's time to shift how you show up. We're not stepping out, we're stepping back with grace, being supportive without inserting ourselves where honestly we're just not needed. And let's face it, we often confuse being wanted with being needed. And that's where we get our feelings hurt because of how we view those two feelings. So what happens when your son marries? I've only had a daughter marry, but I've talked to my friends, and they've told me that when your son marries, you feel like there's this bit of a tug of war. For some mothers, they feel insecure, right? They've spent their whole life being there for their son, and now this other woman is the center of his world. And let's admit it, it can be tricky, especially depending on personalities. The best advice I heard was let the new wife feel safe. No woman wants to feel like she's in competition with her husband's mother, right? She wants a husband and a relationship with his mom. So here's my little, I call it my move, that I recommend. When she walks into the room, or when you walk into a room where she already is, holiday get-togethers, family gatherings, stop what you're doing, go to her first. Welcome her personally. I start that when it's obvious that one of my sons has a girlfriend who looks like things are going to become serious. Just make sure she knows you're happy to see her. And here's a good mindset shift. You're not losing your son, you're expanding your circle, right? Your role isn't to guide him anymore, it's to support him in his new partnership. If she's different than what you imagine, maybe a little possessive, remember your calm, gracious restraint will go further than any confrontation could. Don't critique or compete. Just observe and adjust and watch their dynamic. You know, we're smart women. We can figure out what's going on over there and then figure out how you can fit in. You know, sometimes your son may even pull away for a bit. Whatever you do, don't panic. That's the start of his building a new foundation and gaining confidence. And honestly, isn't that something we dream of for our kids? Keep your door open and your tone warm. Eventually, he'll circle back, but this time as a man who's trying to build his own life and not your little boy. Oh, boo-hoo. That sounds terrible. Sounds too logical, but it calls for a lot of self-restraint. Now, when your daughter marries, things change in a different way. The dynamic shifts. It tends to be a lot more, I've noticed, because you may still be her emotional go-to. But her spouse might feel threatened by that closeness. And so it's easy to slip into more of an advisor mode because daughters often share more. But it's important to remember that she's building her own partnership too. Even with good intentions, it can cause a strain. And it's a big neon sign reminding everyone that, hey, I was here first. Well, your daughter needs to model for you what her boundaries are. You know, that can mean asking, would you like my advice? I love asking that question instead of assuming she wants your advice. And then respecting her if she says, you know, not right now, but hey, Mom, if I need your advice later, I'll ask you. You know, if the spouse is possessive or difficult, that's even trickier because you can't fix their marriage, but you can stay consistent, kind, non-judgmental, so your daughter knows she has a safe place to land if things ever go sideways. Keep the door open. And the same goes for a married son. You know, they will come to you quicker if they know that they will be loved first and not judged. Save your judgment for your private conversations with maybe their dad or their stepfather or a trusted family friend. So what changes do we need to make as the mom? Because honestly, that's all we can really control. This is the hardest part, realizing that you have to change too, and maybe more than them. Our children don't just grow up, they do grow away. And with that, we really want our children to be independent. So what changes do we need to make to let that happen? Well, less directing, more observing, right? We don't have to solve things. We can simply listen. For a lot of us, that's a really big change, and that's really, really hard. Shift from daily involvement to just emotional availability. You know, you're still the heart of the family, but the rhythm is different now. So find fulfillment beyond your kids. Your happiness shouldn't depend on how often they call or text. Build your own interests, your own friendships, different routines. Find joy, invest your time in yourself. Finally, you have the time. Because when you're living fully, your kids see it. You become an inspiration, not an obligation. And you know, you start talking about new and different things. You're not asking so many questions because you're sharing this whole new world that you're experiencing, new volunteer work, a new organization. Plus, how fun to have something to talk about that your kids don't know anything about, something new about you. Now, what do you do if you're single, right? You may be divorced, you may be a widow, a widower. If you're single, it can be extra challenging because you may rely more on your adult children for company or emotional support. But too much of that can make them feel torn. It's like you're an obligation. And it can also keep you from moving forward. You know, the best way to avoid coming across as needy is to have a full life, to push yourself. Make plans that don't involve them. Show them you love them with your independence, but enjoy their company when you're with them. the best of both worlds. Be warm, but not waiting, engaged, but not entangled. It's that mix that keeps the relationship light, respectful, loving, and growing together in the same direction. That's the goal. So if you're married, you have to work with your spouse, right? Stepfather, father, the two of you will model for your children in so many ways. You're not really the head of the family anymore in the same way. There's been an adjustment. You're kind of the family elders. You still are protective of your daughter, protective of your son, but they're now adults. And the key is to be intentional, to talk privately with each other, to get on the same page. Even though you're not in total agreement, you have to support each other. Don't let resentment toward a child, an in-law, break the two of you up or cause problems between the two of you. Make it your shared goal to expand the family with grace and not with control. You don't need to be the center of everything to be deeply valued. I think stepping back together feels really empowering, and go off and do what you want to do. And sometimes you're going to miss something special, but guess what? You're moving on. Setting expectations and communicating clearly. Can I first humbly suggest that if you've just gone through a wedding, that you stop and reset completely. I think weddings can bring out the worst in everyone, including us. Once it's done, all the bills are paid, rewrite that history. Only remember the good, the fun, the laughs. If you let any other feelings simmer, they will hijack the future. Separate the wedding from the marriage and the future of the family. Healthy relationships just don't happen. They have to be intentional. In the early stages of your child's marriage, all those little things will make a big difference down the road. Ask before visiting. Don't weigh in on decisions without being invited to. Compliment freely, criticize rarely. Keep the conversations light, brief, especially when emotions are high. And don't take an attitude if you give them your advice and they don't take it. If something truly bothers you, use I statements. I miss our talks lately, instead of, you never call me anymore, you never text me anymore. You're not managing your child's household. Honestly, you're just nurturing it, adult to adult. It's a new kind of relationship, and it has to be built on respect. I think finally what I would say, I have a daughter who is married. My boys have serious girlfriends, but I understand that every family dynamic is unique, and there's no formula, there's no one size fits all. It's important to stay grounded in yourself, to be gracious, to be self-assured, and to use the time when you're missing them to build a new, better you. Because your peace doesn't depend on how others behave. It depends on how you respond, right? What you choose to let go of. And when we approach this new chapter, calm intention may be all we have. It's going to be a time of change. And you're not losing a child, you're gaining a family. So while I know everyone's experience is different, I would love to hear what you're going through or what you've gone through. But next week, we'll talk about the daughter-in-law, son-in-law relationship when things are difficult. Maybe they're difficult from the start. Maybe you've tried and you just haven't come up with anything that works. At the end of the day, we want our family to expand. We don't want the fragmenting. It'd be nice to open up your front door and invite everyone in. It doesn't always work that way. And there are some relationships that you get to keep at a distance. You're not obligated to become best friends with your new daughter-in-law's parents or son-in-law's parents. So let's talk about that over the next 4 weeks. And please drop your comment and let me know what your situation is, and maybe we can include that in some of our next conversations. Well, thank you for bearing with the scratchy voice. Hopefully next week I'll be back to 100% health. Take care. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.